Hi everybody. I want to welcome you to Faraday Battery event. I'm aware we might have a few people still joining for the next few minutes, but I'd like to get started. And at first, I'm going to give a short introduction, both to myself and to Faraday, and then we'll have three talks afterwards. But just while you're here and before we start any of the talks, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box with your name, degree, subject, and university. Uh, be sure to select all panels and attendees in the chat box, just so that everyone can see it. And where are we? And just I ask that throughout the webinar you encouraged to stay engaged, so get involved in the chat box, post questions in the Q&A box. While the talks are ongoing, you can put questions in the Q&A box and we'll answer them towards the end of the webinar so that we can keep the flow of discussion going. I also ask that you respect other people. Please don't attack people for contributing. All contributions are valued. And protect any of your sensitive information that you don't want to be shared, because people can see in the chat box. We've got a nice turnout, so there's about 23 people and growing, so that's very nice. But without further ado, I'll start a short introduction on myself because right now I'm a stranger. And then I'll tell you a bit more about the battery, about Faraday community. So first of all, a bit about me. I'm Jessica McConnell. I typically go by Jess. I'll be hosting the day today. Very quickly about me, and only some basic details is that, well, by now you might be able to tell from my accent that I am Scottish. I was born and raised in Scotland in North Ayrshire. I completed my undergraduate degree from the University of Edinburgh in chemical physics. I was there from 2017 to 2022. After this, during this, I started a year in industry at a company called CPI, where I was an industrial placement. I then got employed with the same company after graduating, and so in total I was there for about 2 years, just over actually. While I was at CPI, I completed a variety of projects, many of which were battery based, and that's where I actually found myself introduced to the Faraday institution, and where I found a lot of my enthusiasm going towards battery research, which is where I'm now sitting as a PhD researcher at the University of Cambridge, looking at different electrolytes that go into batteries. I said that while I was at CPI, I was introduced to the Faraday Institution. The first Faraday Institution early career researcher conference is actually the first conference that I went to. So it was a very nice introduction to conferences and Faraday. But in terms of Faraday itself, Faraday has over 140 industry partners, CPI being one of them. But Faraday covers a large extent of the UK. There's also 25 academic and research partners across the UK as well, very much spread out. So there's a lot of options for people if they want to be getting involved across the UK. And there's over 500 researchers from many disciplines. There's principal investigators, there's postdoctoral researchers, there's PhDs, but there's also undergrads, there's interns, people working in industry placements that are involved with Faraday projects, such as myself was. But then in terms of the disciplines that Faraday employs go from chemists to physicists to computer scientists to biologists. It really does span over quite broadly what STEM encompasses. There's plenty of engineers as well. And in terms of people that work at Faraday, not all of them have STEM backgrounds. So we really do take in a lot of, Faraday really does take in a lot of people from multiple backgrounds, which is really nice. So there's plenty of different people to talk to. In terms of Faraday's goals, they're very much involved in improving collaboration across research, both within academia and industry across the UK. They're very keen on improving diversity and inclusion across this research sector as well. So you'll find that Faraday is a very inclusive space. And the majority of people that start at Faraday are new to battery research. It's a very upcoming field and not everyone has years of experience in it. When I started with Faraday, I didn't have much experience. But in terms of their overarching goals, they're not just looking to improve inclusivity and diversity, they also have technical targets for us to achieve and improve the battery sector in the UK. So here's a few of their targets. These are as of 2018. Some of them will have changed now, but this is the majority of the targets. And a lot of these targets are included in different work packages that Faraday has. So, for instance, Faraday is looking to cut the cost of battery production, and they will start with where their targets originated at when this research began in 2018 and where they're hoping to get it by 2035. And so you can see they've got many different targets that go across performance of the battery, lifetime of the battery, being able to predict it, and in terms of also sustainability and recyclability. So this is very important. And that's all well and good, but for some people, these targets might not mean much because they don't know a lot about batteries. So I'm very quickly also going to give you a summary of how a battery works before you get multiple talks on batteries. So the example I'm going to use is a lithium ion battery, just because this is like the most basic form. Let me get my pointer out. So in a battery, you would typically have your battery is this main body here, and you'll have a circuit connected on the outside. On both sides of the battery, you have a current collector. One is copper, one is aluminium. And coated on top of these current collectors, you'll have electrodes. So in instance, we'll have an anode and we'll have a cathode. And these are the materials that are actually these are the materials that are involved in the energy storage process of the battery. So in terms of these materials, they have crystalline structures that you can almost consider to have layers. And so when lithium ions move in and out of them during charging and discharging of a battery, they intercalate into these layers. And so down here in the bottom schematic, you can see that as we're charging, we get lithium ions moving in between these layers, and you can get some expansion. And this happens for both your anode and your cathode. They just have different compositions, different crystalline structures slightly, but you still have layers where your ions are moving into the crystalline structure, sitting there, and then when you're changing to either charge or discharging, your ions are moving out. And in the middle of our battery, we have our separator, which allows movement of our molecules across, but without letting our electrodes touch, so there's no short circuiting. And we also have our electrolyte, which is what mobilizes our ions and allows our ions to move from cathode to anode and vice versa easily. So this is basically, or the very basic version of how a battery works. And there's other things associated with this. You could spend years, funnily enough, researching batteries, but that's basically what I wanted to focus on. And in terms of this whole webinar is looking to inspire and train the next generation. Well, Faraday is looking to inspire and train the next generation. This webinar is looking to inspire the next generation to maybe take on an internship with Faraday, or to take on a PhD training program, or to get involved with research in any sense of the way. So without further ado, that's my quick introduction to Faraday. Without further ado, I would like to see if I can stop sharing that. I'm going to pass over to our first speaker. I'll need to get their information first. If our next speaker can share their screen, please. So our first speaker is going to be Nicholas Price. He's currently a battery modeling developer at Electra Vehicles, and he's a former Faraday undergraduate summer experience intern, or as we call them, Faraday Fuse interns.
Yeah, thank you, Jess.
Thank you.
I think you might have to allow me to share or stop sharing before I can.
I'm trying to find my the taskbar, but I feel like it's maybe disappeared. Where are we?
Maybe the host has to do this, Petra?
Jess, you're still sharing.
Yes, I'm trying to stop, but I don't have my taskbar to do that.
Yeah.
I think it just worked. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, can you guys all see my screen okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, perfect. So hey everyone, I'm Nick. I've seen a lot of you guys in the chat are actually PhDs, so hopefully this presentation isn't too irrelevant to you because it was mainly designed for undergraduates or people coming to considering the FUSE internships. But I'm going to be giving you a brief conversation about my career in batteries so far. And yeah, feel free to drop some questions in the chat at the end or throughout the presentation if you guys have any. So just a brief introduction about who I am. So I'm a battery modeling developer at a small startup based out of Boston called Electra Vehicles. And so we specialize in all types of software across the battery industry, whether that be sort of P2D, so physics-informed modeling, or more data-driven embedded machine learning models that exist inside the BMS and things like that. So kind of a whole different suite of different computational models used in the battery sphere. I graduated with a master's degree in chemistry with maths and physics from Imperial in 2023, and I completed my master's project at MIT on an exchange program in chemical engineering, where I focused on the computational modeling of redox flow batteries. And most importantly, I was a FUSE intern in 2020 at the University of Sheffield, where I worked with Solomon Brown in his research group and looked at machine learning for thermal runaway prediction. And that's where all this journey all started. So I'll continue here. So the first question I'm looking to answer is why might you consider batteries as a place to research, a place to work? I think fundamentally for me, the reason that I went into batteries is that I think electrochemistry is fundamentally quite a cool subject. I think it's a really interesting point where maths, physics, and chemistry can kind of all come together. And I think that's a really interesting place to be. I also think that, as Jessica said, there's a lot of cutting edge research that you can spend years on and a lot of inspiring people working in it. And that doesn't, not to say that you necessarily need to have experience here, but it's a very open and welcoming space that there is a lot of cutting edge research happening. And if you look at the crude plot at the bottom here, which shows the different energy demands from different renewable energy solutions, you can kind of see here that batteries and especially energy storage is a place where your work can have real impact, especially when to do with things like the climate crisis and renewable energy. So I think that's also one of the reasons that inspired me to work in this space and one of the things I found the most rewarding. So a little bit about why I did the FUSE internship and why I think it's useful to undergrads. I mean, it was my first real chance to experience a research environment. This is my first year summer. So I'd never really known what or experienced anything. I didn't really know what research environments were like. And I think the FUSE internship was a really interesting experience that allowed me to kind of experience what research is like in a not too serious of an environment. And so it was very supportive. The work wasn't too intense, and they were very just eager to try and help me and guide me along the way. As well as this, the FUSE internships have so many different potential sub internships that you can choose. So there's a massive list of loads and loads of different projects from different universities across the UK, different industry partners that you can choose from, which is, again, I was able to do an internship that actually interested me rather than just working in something like finance or consulting that a lot of my friends tended to do. And yeah, also allowed me to learn some new skills that has inspired me to work where I am today. So this is the first time I had experience in machine learning, especially computational chemistry, machine learning for computational chemistry. And I also met some very cool people. And slight caveat, was able to get paid and get some serious CV material, which as a first year intern was very useful. A bit about my career, and I put career in inverted commas here because I realize I am only 1 year out of university, and so most of you will probably be further along in your careers than I am. But yeah, so as I mentioned, the FUSE internship introduced me to the battery sector. And I then did my master's thesis at MIT on computational modeling of redox flow batteries. And feel free to, I don't know if you guys can click this link, but hopefully you can, if you're interested to have a look at the thesis that I published recently. I then joined a startup, as I said, based out of Boston, working on a bunch of different projects. So, for example, this idea of digital twins, where essentially you create a very accurate physical model of a real life system. In this case, we're talking about electric vehicles. And you can not only parameterize them with a physics informed model, but also you can use some machine learning techniques to kind of perfect that model. So that's a very accurate representation of that real life object. And then you can simulate performance and you can probe that system in order to get quite useful insights that might take a long time otherwise. Again, optimization of battery parameters for physical models. This is a more mathematical, a more data science type thing, but essentially taking a battery and parameterizing it. And what that means is basically taking the different values associated with the battery itself. So things like electrode thickness, electrolyte conductivity, and things like that, and getting very accurate values for those that might have been getting, and as the PhDs among you will know, getting from literature is actually quite difficult. And then also building things like state of charge, state of health models, using more real world data from BMS systems, which is, again, I'm sure as many of you will know, quite messy and difficult to deal with. And a day in the life for me is quite boring, just coding, cooking, climbing, I put down here. And just to finish up here, a bit of future advice to the people, to the undergrads out there. The Faraday Institute is your best friend. I mean, they've been so supportive, and especially during my Fuse internship, were very eager to help and basically point me in the right direction. Again, my second point here, I think the one I want to emphasize the most is reach out to people. I mean, most of the opportunities that I've taken place in, the internships, the master's placements, the conferences, whatever it might be, they've all come from just simple messages, whether it be an email or LinkedIn. Just reach out to people. People are happy to help, happy to chat. That's some advice that I would give. And finally, just, yeah, find something you're passionate about. I think if you're going to be working in this space for whether it be a PhD or industry, you're going to be there for a decent amount of time. So make sure you find a topic that you really are interested in and doesn't feel like work. And just some final useful resources for you guys. This is the holy grail of what I used throughout my entire degree. It's the Electrochemical Engineering by Harb and Fuller. It basically did my thesis for me, so I would definitely recommend checking that out if you're interested. There's a couple of courses here that I took that I found really interesting as well. Introduction to Programming and Electrochemical Energy Systems, which are both fantastic. Again, keep up to date with research if you're interested, as there's many amazing posters and papers coming out from Faraday-sponsored PhDs, as well as things like the Journal of Electrochemical Society and RSC. And yeah, please feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn or email. And yeah, follow up with any further questions. Happy to chat with any of you. And yeah, good luck with your future careers, everyone.
Thank you, Nick. Unfortunately, I can't seem to, Petra, I may ask you to allow me to put my video on again. But thank you, Nick, for presenting there. Our next speaker is Sean Scott. Sean, if you're able to share your presentation, just a reminder for everyone that you can put questions in the chat box, but also there is a Q&A box as well. And once all the speakers have spoken, we'll go through the questions and answer them as we go. But so our next speaker is Sean Scott. He's a research associate at on the Relib project with Faraday, and he's a former Faraday Institution PhD researcher as well. So without further ado, please take it away, Scott. Sean.
Sorry, thank you very much. So thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Sean. A bit about me. So as Jess said, I'm a research associate at the University of Leicester as part of the Relib project. So from that, we work on the recycling and reuse of lithium-ion batteries. Specifically, I work on remanufacturing of batteries, so taking materials that have reached the end of their life and trying to find ways to regenerate them and put them into new batteries. And I also look at design for recycle and life cycle assessment. So trying to find design strategies that can help improve recyclability in the future at the end of life. So I kind of just wanted to highlight this first. So this is my research group. You can easily spot that my eyes are closed in this picture, and we couldn't use any of the other takes because the professors had their eyes closed in the other ones. But this is my group, led by Andrew Abbott, Carl Ryder, and Jake Yang. And I think I wanted to highlight here that the skills that you do over your PhD, especially when you move into academia a bit further, even if you reach the end of whatever you decide to do your PhD in that research group, and you decide that, you know, batteries aren't for you, or solar cells aren't for you, or whatever it is, the skills that you pick up are applicable to other technologies or other similar research areas, as well as the soft skills that you pick up just from doing a PhD. So I just want to highlight that because I've had the opportunity as part of this group to work in loads of these different technology areas as well. And it's just been really useful to see how things that you pick up and learn over the course of your career can be directly applicable to things you never thought you'd get involved with. So yeah. So a bit about my career up to this point. So I did my undergrad at Leicester as well. I was there from 2015 to 2019. And I had a particular interest in materials science and green chemistry. Picked a lot of them optional modules, and I had my master's project in the sustainable metallurgy of chromium and manganese, so trying to extract those two metals out of ore bodies. And it was through trying to figure out why you'd want to do that for manganese in particular, that kind of opened the door to battery science. So I read a lot more about it. Manganese is one of them materials that Jess mentioned is in the electrode active materials. And we need to use it for some of our active materials. So I approached my supervisor and very casually asked about a PhD. And he talked about the Faraday Institution, and the rest is history, as they say. I've been working on the Relive project now for about 6 years. I did my 4-year PhD, and I've been working for a little over a year on the Relive project as a postdoc. So I've had the benefit of a PhD training course with the Faraday Institution to really develop and enhance those skills that you pick up, project management, time management, that sort of thing. And I think that's been really valuable to really build upon what you would naturally do as a PhD student and really enhance your future career prospects, developing them skills early and getting a lot of experience early, very crucially. And then as part of my postdoc role, as I'll come on to in a second, I've been very lucky to be part of the Early Career Researcher Committee, so putting on some great events for the development and the training of other early career researchers. And I've also been the recipient of a grant that allowed me to do a lot more traveling than I thought I would do at the start of my postdoc that I'll come on to in a second. So my PhD experience was a lot more lab-based. So I had a lot of days making up electrode slurries in the lab that make up the electrode materials. A lot of imaging in front of microscopes, days and days spent trying to get pretty images for my thesis. And then also a lot of days that were a lot more difficult, you know, when you're spending weeks and maybe even months of your life working on a group of materials, and then you get to the end of it and they don't work, or they don't work as well as you thought, and you just kind of wonder what the heck am I doing here? So I think it takes a lot of training of yourself and kind of self-reflection to kind of pick yourself back up off the floor in them times and keep going and mitigate the risk of a lot of that stuff not working. And it's an essential part of PhD life, but it's also been essential for postdoc, and I'm sure it would be applicable to industry and anything else as well. The training visits that the Faraday have on, and that I was part of their second cohort, and we had a lot of experiences with presenting and training around that. So doing online training, like presenting like I'm doing now, going in person to places, and also allowing you to get experience with presenting to multiple different audiences to really get your work out there, but also inform the general public and even entice, get early people earlier in their career to join the Faraday Institution. So I think the most important part for me, though, and the thing I enjoyed the most was the presentations and outreach part of it. This is a picture from Electrochem in 2022, which was my first like big conference after COVID and everything calmed down. And I really enjoyed conference speaking and getting the work out there and having communications with people in our sector to try and find ways of collaboration and other things. But I think one of the most important things I also did was something called Pint of Science. And in the UK, around the country every year or so, they basically set up an event that you can present work, scientific research to the general public. And it's in a pub, so you can have a drink. But I think that sort of presentation style is really, really good because it allows you to get your work out there to the general public and engage with them a lot more. And quite often when they're going to these events, they also want to know what's going on. And they're very happy to engage and like learn about some of the difficulties that we have in developing some of the things that you see in the news and what have you. So those type of events are really useful to get involved with, and it's something that I did quite a lot of during my PhD and really found good value in doing that. But now my postdoc life is a bit different, a little bit less time in the lab and a bit more responsibility. So I'm responsible for running and like delivering deliverables to the project and being responsible for those, which is a lot more responsibility than you get during your PhD life when you're just a student and you're just in the lab working away. I do a lot more supervision now. Now I have PhD students, and kind of the transition from student to supervisor is very jarring for me, and learning to delegate rather than just go and do it yourself is something that I'm still learning now. But having the opportunity to do that in an academic environment is very nice and very like stabilizing in a sense, because you are allowed to have a bit more time to kind of get involved and like ease off the brake, rather than it being kind of a very snap decision. But I've also had the pleasure of being part of the ECR committee, as I mentioned, and last year I was involved with the planning and delivery of the ECR conference, and also involved with other early career training events that will be coming this year and next year as well, which I'm really happy about and really take pride in that, putting on events to help early career researchers in their development and taking some of the training opportunities I had during my PhD and trying to share that around basically, and putting on similar events for them, even those that are not part of the Faraday PhD cohorts. And then the last one is about my trip to the US. So I was very fortunate to be awarded the Collaboration Award from Faraday last year. This was something that was put on by the Faraday and as an opportunity for early career researchers to get money from a grant proposal and get experience with that, but also set up collaborative projects yourself without your supervisors and things like that. And this was a project that involved us going over to the US and engaging in a heck of a lot of meetings with researchers to try and set up collaborative links, but also crucially trying to develop our life cycle analysis models for the ReLib project and compare them with the ReCell and integrate with them there. And that was really, really great. And yeah, it was the first time I went to the US outside of Disney World. So it was a very good experience on that front as well. But I think this is the most important slide for me personally, and it's kind of just assessing what I've learned so far in my career. So yeah, I've taken the academic route, and research is really rewarding. You know, when you get through your thesis and you get the PhD at the end, but it is also really challenging, as I alluded to. Like there are a lot of days where you kind of come to the end of it and you realize you haven't actually got the result that you desired, and you have to pick yourself back up and go in and do it again, and that can be very challenging. But also just learning a load of techniques, especially if you're a lab-based PhD student or postdoc, like learning techniques and keep learning is something that is quite challenging to do, and keeping with it can lead to some very good and rewarding papers and other outputs therein. Networking is really difficult. I think this is more of a personal thing for me. I do struggle with networking, but the experiences that I've had with joining the ECR committee and going to America was born from networking. And it is clear that network is essential, whatever career you go on to have, is it academia, industry, what have you. So it's just a really essential thing to do, and should be really important part of any researcher's life. Presenting your work to wider communities, I've kind of gone over this, but presenting to a wide range of audiences is always really useful, because sometimes you can get perspectives that you didn't know were useful, or just weren't unknown to you at all. So I think definitely advocate for a lot of presenting and a lot of showcasing your work. But I think the most important one is the bottom point. I should have put that in bold. It is easy to burn out. I burnt out in my second year of my PhD, and it's very easy to do. Researchers, I think, especially PhD students with the ones that I've spoken to, burnout is a big aspect of it, because you constantly have the thesis looming. And I always felt that I had to work more and more often to get it done. And it led to me burning myself out in my second year and having to take a bit of a break. So I would always say to everyone and stress that from the offset, try and maintain a good work-life balance, because I don't think it doesn't just improve your life in terms of you not getting to that point, but it also improves your work. The work that you do when you're stressed, in my experience, is often not your best. So taking a bit of a step back and a bit of a break is always important. And I've got better at doing that thanks to a lot of the management courses and stuff that I've been able to be part of. So definitely takes opportunities like that with both hands as well. So thank you very much for listening to me talk about my career and stuff. So thank you very much. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions about doing a PhD or what it's like in academia. My email address is right there, or you can search for me on LinkedIn. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. If anyone has any questions for Sean, feel free to add them into the Q&A box. There is a separate Q&A box aside from the chat box. So if you've got any questions, feel free to put them in here. It's just easier for us to keep track of questions. We'll go on to our next speaker now, which is Bhavini Patel. Bhavini, please share your presentation. Bhavini is a first-year Faraday Institution PhD researcher at Imperial College London, and she is also a former Hughes intern as well. So hopefully she'll give us a bit of an perspective on her day-to-day, her PhD, and potentially her point of view of Hughes.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you, Jess,
go
for
ahead.
the great introduction. Yeah, so as you said, I'm a first-day PhD student at Imperial College London. So just a little bit of background about my project. So what I'm actually doing is taking paper waste from the paper manufacturing industry, and we're using that to create parts for lithium sulfur batteries. All very interesting, but I'm going to today speak more about how I've got here. And so, yeah, this is kind of an overview of my journey. I'm going to talk through each part. So we'll start at my secondary education. So I went to
Hi, Bhavini.
Yeah?
Sorry, you need to put your full screen on. Enter the presentation mode.
Is it not? Is it not?
Click the
is it now?
slideshow button.
Now?
Now we can see your layout of your presentation.
Okay. So this is not full screen, is it?
No. Are you maybe sharing wrong screen?
All right, let me try again. Let me just share my entire screen. Like this?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's working now.
All right. Lovely. Yeah. So yeah, just talking about my secondary school. So I went to a state school where not many people went into science, to be honest. So I didn't really know much about what I wanted to do, but I kind of didn't want to sit at a desk all day, and I like doing being in the lab. So I decided to do a chemistry degree, which I think all in all was a good decision. I spent 4 years at Oxford, where I did an integrated Masters of Chemistry. And although this slide shows a slight transition from just working hard to graduation, a lot of things happened in those 4 years. And so I'm just going to talk through them quickly. So I tried to apply for as many things as possible and not be too strict about what I was applying for. But most of the time, I just wanted to do things that were fun. That's kind of what I was concerned about. And so that leads me to the first summer internship that I did. So I found this by like searching online for any internship over the summer. I just didn't want to stay at home in London. I thought it'd be boring. So I wanted to do something sciencey or anything really, but just something sciencey because I really enjoyed it and I wanted to be in a lab. And so I did this internship with the Open University, and I was working on electrospinning fibers to embed iron nanoparticles for the treatment of anemia. It was really a lot of fun. I met some really cool people, and this was like the first time I got to see what doing a PhD might be like. I was working under the supervision of a PhD student in a really small group. There was only 2 PhD students in this group, and 1 supervisor, and there were 4 interns, and so it was a really fun opportunity to kind of see what life could be like. And yeah, I lived in Milton Keynes, and if anyone knows about it, there's a lot of roundabouts, and I learned that to be true. But yeah, that was an enjoyable experience. And then in the summer of my 3rd year, I was lucky enough to do a Fuse summer internship, which was also at Imperial. And as you can see, it was also on electrospinning. So I was working on electrospinning fibers from paper waste, and another opportunity to do a paid summer internship, and also experience something different. So before going into this, I had no idea about batteries. Electrochemistry is taught in very small amounts in a chemistry degree. So I don't really know why they picked me, but it was really fun. I got to work in a really big group for the first time. There was like maybe 30 or 40 people in this group, and it was just a completely different experience to my last internship and really showed me what the sector could be. And I also, by doing this, got to make the scientific poster. And like when I was doing this internship, this summer particularly, I had 2 opportunities. One was to work as part of the civil service, to do that for the summer, or to do this Fuse internship. And in the end, I went with the Fuse internship just because I thought, I have the rest of my life to work, so I might as well do enjoy what I do, and keep going in science. So then came the big day, like after I graduated. So my master's project was in organic chemistry. So I was working in organic electrochemical transistors, and I knew I didn't want to do that. So then I had kind of these 2 options of one, doing the graduate scheme that I'd got onto, which was with Johnson Matthey, and they were a chemistry-based company, and it seemed like a really interesting and like opportunity. I would be working like with a cohort of people, but I think even while I was applying for it, the thing at the back of my mind was, should I do a PhD? And so I reached out to my Fuse supervisor. So this is Sam. She's a Faraday Fuse student currently, and she's in her 4th year. She's about to graduate. And I asked her, is there any PhD opportunities going or anything? And I was lucky enough that a postdoc in the group that I was working with is now an independent research fellow and also my supervisor. So a very, very lucky opportunity in that. I just happened to ask if there was any PhDs going, and she said, there's one practically in exactly what I was doing over the summer, which I really love doing. And so I've really got the opportunity to make a project of my own, which has been so much fun. And so that's kind of where I am now. So I'm doing, this is our group, 1st year PhD student. I get to lead my own project, and I interact with a lot of people. So this is the extended group, the huge group that we work part of, and it's been really fun. And as part of my PhD, I'm also on the Faraday enrichment scheme, and so we get to be part of a great host of other students and go on interesting go to interesting places and stuff. So this was us at the Nissan car factory, and I've really enjoyed my PhD so far. I know I feel like I'm just in my 1st year, so there's still probably a lot of hard things to come, but yeah, that's been me. So thank you for listening, and please follow me on LinkedIn if you have any questions or anything like that.
Thank you, Bhavini. Yes, that's a great reminder, just as you said. I'd really encourage, if you want to add any of the speakers on LinkedIn, you're more than welcome to. I believe they'll all have Faraday on their LinkedIn anyway, so you'll be easy enough to catch them if you can. I think now would be a good time to go into questions. So if we can just ask all our speakers to put their cameras back on, and hopefully we'll go through a few questions
Yeah, so
before
we
we finish it.
just talk about the opportunities that Faraday can offer. And then from there we can then go into questions after. Does that work?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, so I just thought we'd give a quick overview of the opportunities that Faraday's got, which many of our researchers have touched on anyway. Can you see my screen? Yep.
Yes.
Is that working?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I just thought, I'm Dom Greitsmith. I'm the training manager at the Faraday Institution, and we could put this together to just highlight some of the opportunities that you may want to think about after this call of where you wanted to go next. But I just want to say thank you very much to all our speakers. All of them have come through different routes into the battery sector, and all of them have their own individual stories to share. I'd really recommend you connecting with them after and taking away the message that there's no perfect way into the battery sector, but we need as many people as possible, as Jess rightly said at the start, to help in the battery sector to solve some of the current challenges that we're facing. So we run a scheme every summer called the Faraday Undergraduate Summer Experience, also known as FUSE. And this is where for undergrad students in their first or second or third year, if you're doing an integrated master, can take part in a paid 8-week placement in a research lab or industry partner linked to the battery sector. And there are 48 projects to apply for this year, and they're ranging from universities from St Andrews all the way down to St Andrews to Southampton. And you can apply to be in part of these placements. You do get paid, which is really nice, and you get to take part in cohort calls, and you get to make a scientific poster at the end of it. And it really gives you a kind of flavour of what it's like to work in a startup or industry as well. And we really want to give you some experience of what it's like in the battery sector, increase your knowledge, and provide you those links with positive role models. And as you've seen from Bhavini's talk, if you meet people on the way, they may be able to help you in latter ends of your career as well. So these are all launching on the 10th of March. And I'd say the best way to find out about all these FUSE placements is to follow us on LinkedIn, because we'll mention when they go live. And if you want to find out more, if you go onto our FUSE webpage, you'll see all the projects there when they launch on the 10th. So if you're interested in doing a PhD, I'd really recommend you kind of having a look at current opportunities there as well. Majority of the PhDs that we have in the UK are highlighted on the 34, on Find a PhD. And there are currently 34 out there at this moment in time across multiple areas of battery and energy storage. Also, if we find out about other opportunities, including masters and PhDs, we have an area on our website which you can click on as well. If you go into the Faraday Institution Career Development, and then you just select your level that you're looking for, and it mentions opportunities. Once you've got your PhD, you are very welcome to apply for our training program. And as Bhavini mentioned, and Sean mentioned, and Jess, they're all on our Faraday PhD enrichment scheme. And this is where you'll get an extra £7,000 a year in training to attend battery schools up and down the country, as well as meet industries and have links through that and internships as well. We don't open these applications till late in June. This is because we're interested in people who've actually got a PhD as well. I should say that these PhDs must be fully funded for 3 to 3.5 years or 4 years and be in the UK to take part in these. We also have a battery career portfolio. So at the end of this, if you're not sure you want to do a master's, or you're in a different stage, or you're finishing your PhD, we have a battery career portfolio page. The real aim of this is to give you an overview of the different careers you could go into, who's involved, and how to get in contact with them as well. So it's broken into lots of different sectors, and we'd certainly say that it's a portfolio because no one's career is linear. So you may want to think about, interest in certain sectors and how to get involved in that. We've also got case studies on there of those people who've done those kind of transitions, and some of their learnings as well from that as well. But it's a completely free opportunity to get involved in. And I'd strongly recommend, if you're interested in careers in the battery sector, to get involved in that. So thank you very much for today. I'm sure Jess is now going to open the floor to questions. If you do have, or you do want to get in contact or learn anything about the Fuse internships or any further information about that, do ask questions. But thank you very much for today, and I'll hand you back to Jess. Thank you very much, Jess.
Thank you, Tom. Can I ask our speakers to put their camera on, just so we can answer questions? The first question we've got was initially directed towards Nick, but I'd like to open up to the whole panel, and asking, can you comment on finding a job post academia, like post PhD? Is it easy? And I think one of you is in industry and one of you went into academia, so can you both comment on potentially different aspects of that? But Vinny, I'm aware this maybe doesn't pull you in, but we'll get a question for you later on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start. I think so the question was why or how easy was it to get into industry?
What's the kind of common factors you need to take into account? And do you think there's a difference between applying for industry and applying for academia? What did you need to consider when you were applying, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was, will I be able to get the same level of intellectual stimulation from industry as I would if I did a PhD? I think Sean will probably be able to comment on this a little bit more deeper. But yeah, I think I was able to find a job that allowed me to do research. And so for me, that was good enough. It kind of gave me a little bit more freedom to work across a whole suite of different things, rather than at the time, I wasn't necessarily exactly sure what research I wanted to focus on. So I think going to industry for me was like basically a way that I could kind of not necessarily narrow down exactly what I wanted to focus on, and have a bit more freedom in the kind of things I wanted to research. But I'll pass to Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I've had experience with applying for both industry and academia, but for different reasons. They are individually like complicated to get into. They do look for slightly different things, and they accommodate slightly different things, and like even your CV is going to be slightly different, because one focuses very much on academic output and papers, whereas the other one's focusing more on the skills that you bring to a team. So your route through is going to be not necessarily different at that stage where you're coming out of a PhD, but what you're choosing to focus on is going to be different in terms of your application and then your subsequent role, is something I would say.
Okay, thank you. And a little extended question for Nick in this regard is, you've obviously gotten a job where it's taking you out of the country and you're also working in a startup. What were your considerations when you were going to making this decision? Because obviously moving out of the country is a big step, and then startups between like really large established companies is also something to balance up.
Yeah, so sorry, I should have been clear. The company is based out of Boston, but I work remotely in London, so I didn't actually have to leave the country. But I think in terms of why I joined a startup, it kind of relates to my previous answer. Just the freedom that you have at startup is something that I've really enjoyed. I think the ability to work alongside so many different people and not really feel the pressure that you might feel in a bigger institution of reaching out to people, having like a more informal chat, just the ability to kind of work across so many different things and kind of experience the whole industry rather than just maybe one very specific sector of it has been really interesting for me. I think that's one of the reasons I've loved working at a startup, for sure.
Yes, thank you. And now to take a step back in your career, and talk a wee bit more about maybe like internships or maybe applying for PhDs. In terms of applying for like a Fuse internship, which a number of you have managed to complete a Fuse internship, what sort of attributes would you think are highly regarded on an application? What do you think people are maybe looking for, specifically around Fuse internships? And for you personally, how did you find out about these internships? Was it through Faraday or was it through universities or? So Bhavini, would you like to start on that one?
Yeah, I can go first. So in terms of how I found out, it was sent on an email link through every chemistry student who went to Oxford. So I think that was just like how I found out. And then in terms of how I got one, so I applied to quite a few projects. I just thought it increased my chances to get onto a project. And I wasn't really too concerned about what I was doing. I just wanted to be in a lab for most of it. And then I got accepted for this one at Imperial, and I had an interview for it. And I asked, like, after I got the internship, and especially now that I'm back, I've asked, oh, like, why did you pick me? Because they're fairly competitive. She said that there were like, I think 40 applicants for this one, and she did eight to 10 interviews that were quite short. And I knew nothing about batteries. I had no electrochemistry background really. And she was just like, you were enthusiastic. You seemed like you really wanted to do what we were doing. And I think that's kind of maybe the biggest thing to take away when you're applying for anything is if you come across as passionate, hopefully that will shine through in your applications. And to not like worry too much when you get rejected. Like it's a numbers game. It's just life really. But you know, just try your best and yeah, cast a big net.
Yeah. Sean, do you want to add anything to that?
I think I just agree in general. Like if more so than what's on your CV or anything like that, it's passion that people are looking for, and often it'll be the passion that they remember more so than anything else. I think going for a PhD, it's probably very similar to a Fuse internship in terms of what they're looking for in the first instance. It's just a genuine passion. You know, they don't really, well, at least in my experience, they didn't really care what my grades were in each course or anything like that. It was very much a, well, do you actually want to do it, or are you just doing it because you're already here type thing. So yeah.
And Nick, do you have anything to add, or do you feel like it's been fairly well covered?
Yeah, I think it's been well covered by the other two. Completely agree.
Nice. We do have one specific question for Nick, and it's specifically asking you, could you please explain what are the major electrochemical parameters we need to focus on for physical modeling of batteries?
I guess this can probably be opened up to the rest of the guys as well, because this is, I mean, I'm sure they have some experience with dealing with electrochemical parameters, but I think it's quite a broad question. I would definitely consider, if you haven't had the chance to work with any electrochemical modeling software, if you have the chance, look into PyBAM. I'll put a link in the chat. They have an open source repository which kind of allows you to set up some very basic simulations of electrochemical simulations of lithium-ion batteries, and I think that will give you a better answer than I ever could as to what parameters mean are the most impactful. So when you use PyBAM, you're able to kind of simulate performance by altering specific parameters like electrolyte conductivity, all these different factors, tortuosity, things like that, that you can kind of very easily simulate, I don't know, hours, months of performance and see exactly how specific parameters impact the overall performance. But yeah, I'll definitely, I'll put a link in the chat for everyone.
Thank you. Sean, Bhavini, do you have anything to add to that? Or are you quite happy for Nick to? Yeah, okay, that's fine. We do have another question, and it says, can you comment on what would be the benefits of starting your career after a PhD in a startup or in a big company? It's not necessarily directed to anyone, but it's maybe more applicable to Sean or Nick.
So coming from the prospect of somebody who went kind of the more university as part of a larger project route, I think it's good for kind of getting the breadth of research and kind of getting an idea of what is out there and where your work can feed into a larger image. I think looking at a blue sky thing is very good to do when you're part of a larger community, where I would assume your individual thing is less of a focal point because there's just a larger picture in general. And I think it's quite useful to have experience in, probably having experience in both. and it's something that I'm definitely wary of, that I want to have an experience of something that's a bit smaller, tighter knit team. But I'm sure Nick can talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of covered it briefly in my other answers, but I think when you are working at a startup, you have an ability to really get hands-on experience with the whole suite of different things. So not necessarily just the development side of things, whether that be actually coding the computational models in my case, but you're also able to have more customer-facing interactions. You're able to do more management type roles because, I mean, fundamentally, if you're working at a small startup, you're really going to get thrown in at the deep end straight away. Therefore, you might be leading a project in the first few months of working there. And I think I can't comment on the industry, on the large scale industry side of things, but I think that ability to kind of like just get thrown into something and get stuck in and see land on your feet is something that I really loved about working at a startup.
Yeah, thank you both. Those very good answers. We've got another question. It's just maybe more focused towards Bhavini, but what are your plans post PhD, if you have any plans?
I mean, I've really just started, so I think that's a difficult question to answer. But generally, I think I quite like research so far, so maybe sticking in that. But to be honest, I think one of the joys of doing a PhD is that I can just take every opportunity that comes, and that's kind of how I got here as well. Like I just anything that seemed interesting to me, I started following it, and I think that's what I plan to do for the next 4 years and see where that takes me.
Nice, that's a good answer. Thank you. We have another question that says, what do you like? This is for everybody, may I add. What do you like the most about studying and or working in the battery sector? Sean, would you like to start this one?
Yeah. I think it's that it has a tangible kind of benefit. I think that for me is a big thing. I think I struggled in my undergrad career to connect with things because for me personally, organic chemistry was very abstract. Or you'll work for 4 years and get a little tiny product at the end, and then you're supposed to be happy about that. Whereas with battery science and stuff like that, even in other technologies, you're making a clear progressing the field forward, and it is a tangible thing to see in most cases, especially with things like that. So for me, that was the most important aspect of my work, is that I can see what my work and my colleagues' work is doing.
Thank you. Nick, do you want to comment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I completely agree with Sean. I think one of the most interesting things about being in the battery sphere, especially from the industry side of things, is that you can see the code or the software that you put together being used and it being used usefully, which I think is something that's super rewarding. And especially when you are doing in the industries for electric vehicles or for stationary energy storage and things like that, these are solutions that hopefully will have a massive impact on the climate. And so kind of related to what Sean was saying, it really kind of gives your work meaning and purpose and can be like a really rewarding sphere to work in.
Thank you. And we've not got much time left, but Bhavini, do you have anything to add to their answers?
Just also, yeah, being around great people. I think everyone in this sector is really kind and everyone's really enthusiastic about what they do and what they see their future being. And I think that's a really important thing to be a part of.
Thank you very much. So we've only got a couple minutes left. I think it's maybe going to be 1 minute actually. But thank you everyone for attending. Thank you our speakers for giving their talks and answering your questions. I also want to remind everyone that this session's been recorded. You'll be able to have access to it later on if you're wanting. It should be uploaded online. And to encourage to connect with anyone on LinkedIn, be it our speakers, myself, Dominic, Petra, or anyone else that's in the chat that's offered up their network as well to be connected with. But I want to thank you everyone. I hope you have a lovely rest of your battery day. Hopefully everyone here is going to be still doing batteries for the rest of the day. I know I am. But thank you for attending and thank you for speaking as well, everybody. Have a nice day.